So without more ado, welcome to the October lecture, and it's my pleasure to pass the microphone to our chairman, Mr. Tony Cox.
Thank you, Lawrence. Welcome everybody. And welcome everybody that's online. I gather we've got some 15 or so people of you online. So welcome everybody here. This is the second of our lectures here. So first of all, just a few brief notices. Just to let all the members know, we have installed CCTV in this building. Now, this is for security purposes, but just be aware now that there is now CCTV when you come into the building and you are on camera. I say this is not for in any way to be shown to any third party, except if in the event of any sort of incident. But I just point this out. There is a notice about this going out. Secondly, in accordance with normal practice, as we're now back in the hall, at the interval, we will be sending round a box for donations. We would ask that our visitors here, we would ask for a contribution of £3, please, towards the cost of running this lecture. Right, now that's just the sort of parish notices out the way. So on to our main event here. We're delighted to welcome today Carol Flavin. Trying to get the pronunciation right here, who I think many of you will have seen from her starring role in what's it called, the Great British Trains, the Great Model Railway Challenge, and of course now is also featuring in print. I have here the latest BRM. I'll just find it, where you can see an article by Carol. And no doubt she's going to explain rather more about it today. So without further ado, I'd like to pass you over to Carol, and thank you very much, Carol.
Well, thank you for that. Well, good evening. My name is Carol Flavin, and I will start by saying I am a railway modeller, just to establish why I'm here. Some of you may have seen me in the Great Model Railway Challenge. There will be some of you, of course, who didn't like the programme and didn't agree with it and probably didn't watch it, but that's not the point, I suppose, because a couple more people here were in it as well. Some of you may have seen some of my articles. Just recently, well, in the last 12 months, I've had 9 articles written. Sort of shared between British Railway Modelling and Railway Modeller. And they've been quite an interesting exercise for me. Standing and speaking, frankly, is nothing that gives me any great fear. I spent a fair bit of my working life having to stand in front of lots of people and talk. But actually, and I used to write reports, but I can tell you now, writing reports and writing articles is very, very different. And the first one I submitted to British Railway Modelling to Phil Parker, who some of you will have seen, don't laugh, a month ago at your last talk, sent it straight back and said, you don't need to write it as if it's a report. You're supposed to be writing an article to catch people's interest. So I sent it back to him and said, well, right, you're the editor, show me what I need to do. That one was on the retaining wall, which you may or may not have seen. The retaining wall is right at the back. It's about 5 foot long, and it's my most watched video. And frankly, it was also the most boring article to write, and probably the most boring thing I made on the whole layout, because all I did was make the same thing each time. But for some reason, it seems to have taken off in Australia. And a lot of people are watching it there, but of course they do a lot of modelling about British railways in Australia. And there's some Americans and a few Japanese as well that write to me. So, railway modelling, how did I get into it? I have a family, and I don't remember having anything much to, well, 2 of them are sitting here in front of me now, along with my husband. I don't remember model railways featuring a great deal. I did help my dad when I was a child, and I can tell you now, that was a long time ago. After that, I don't remember it really featuring, but they started producing children. And grandchildren are really quite enticing in a lot of ways, frankly. I don't know why, because half the time you could sort of get cross with them, but the rest of the time you want to do really nice things with them. And about 4 years ago, our eldest grandson, who is called Joshua, or Josh, got particularly interested in looking at model railways. And David and his friend David and various other friends of ours who are all called David. Do you want to put your hand up if any of you here are called David? Either you are or you're not going to tell me. As it happens, I used to take Josh out to model railway exhibitions. But when it got to the point where Josh started to be given stuff, and I truly mean given stuff, people were very kind and very generous, and he got presents and things, and he wanted to do something with it. David had other interests, and making a model railway wasn't one of them. So I ended up deciding I'd help him. So we had a bit of fun sticking bits of track together and putting a controller on it. He got a Hornby controller, you know, the little ones that we all end up with. And we put it on a trestle table on our landing upstairs. But of course, what happens is you look at this track and you look at these trains, and no matter how many you can cram onto a trestle table, it's never good enough, is it? So he and I sort of stood back from it and went, it needs a few other things, doesn't it, Grandma? I said, yeah, okay. So we started to put stations on and little bridges, and we built a few things, some of which are actually on this big layout behind me, which I'm going to come on to in a minute. And because the trestle table wasn't big enough, was it? So poor old David got inveigled into helping me build a big L shape. We're very fortunate. We do live in a big Victorian house. This particular room had a wooden floor, which actually you can imagine is really quite useful if you're building these things. And we put some staging up, and I started to build stuff on it. Probably did it over about a 9-month period, maybe a year. Lots of secondhand. My ethos, frankly, is model it and make it look as realistic as possible and don't spend too much money on it. At least it was when I started out, because I really didn't think this was going to last. I thought it was just a fad, frankly. Trouble was, as I got going with it, I started to quite enjoy it myself. I suppose, he's laughing. So I guess I'm not going to be the only one who came about it like that. But we made an L-shaped layout. Now, if you look at this here, it was part of that along the back and a bit along there, the first one. All exquisitely made by David, frankly, and as far as the staging was concerned. We used OSB, put cork on the top, painted, played, built, created, laid a lot of track. Because bear in mind, of course, this was being built for kids. Now, I'm not going to hold my hands up here and say it is anywhere in particular, because it isn't. It is one place only, and that was my imagination, and subsequently theirs. So we started to build it. There was a lot of track. It allowed them to use analog controller and put a lot of trains on it. And most of you know that children like to run trains, several trains. Not one of their two, but one of my grandsons actually spent a lot of time building exceptionally long trains, setting them all off, waiting to see which one crashed into which one first. Okay, so round and about, there was all the stuff I was making, and I really, really had to hold my tongue and say, right, well, I'm making it for you, you can play with it. I have to say he has now grown up a great deal, and I'm going to be showing you 5 videos, because I can hardly be here talking about making scenery. I mustn't touch that, it's a mic, isn't it? I can hardly be here talking to you about scenery and making layouts when I can't bring it with me, can I? That's 11 foot by 11 foot, fills the bedroom. So some of you may or may not have seen the fact that I ended up making quite a lot of videos. That's another thing that I got commissioned to do, British Railway modelling mostly, although Railway Modeller did an article, one of my articles last month, which was about mountains. And that was the first time, or one of the first times, they actually put out a video alongside their magazine, because I think they would like to move a little bit into that direction. So I'm going to go back a bit now, because I don't want to talk about too much about this until I've gone to the loco ladies business. I'm not quite ready to show it, but
they wanted to see it, so we've given them a screen share for a minute.
Oh, they've not seen this.
They could see, but they wanted a clearer picture.
Ah, right. Okay. So once the L shape was finished, Steve Flint subsequently did an article on it. And the boys, two of my grandsons, were pictured in the magazine. We watched the first Great Model Railway Challenge. Now, I think 2 people here at least were in it. At the end of it, they did this little thing they do on these programs. If you'd like to take part in the next series, but Joshua went, "You could do that, Grandma." Now, bear in mind, you know, I've been doing this for about a year and a half at the most. Goodness knows what was in my head, because I went, "Oh, okay," and sent my mobile number off to the production company, who came back to me, had a long chat, asked me to do a couple of videos. Next thing I know, it's, "Will you put together the first female team, please?" So not only was I going to be on it, but I was going to do the first female team and be its team leader, which I wasn't expecting. And we did have an interesting exercise trying to bring people in to join us. Now, without quoting anybody in particular, I found it a little difficult to get people to join us. I did get, please forgive me, my husband says I don't know enough to do it, or I don't want people to see my wrinkles on a television screen. Well, there were 5 of us who didn't care about that. And also, the other one was, well, I just don't know enough to do it on my own, or to just do it with you. So we didn't get many modelers. So the people you're going to see in a minute, because my first video is just a minute and a half about the local ladies. My sister-in-law, David's sister. My best friend, who, when I say my oldest best friend, kicks me because she doesn't like being referred to as old. Another best friend, who, by the way, made amazing cakes. There was somebody in here earlier on was talking about cakes and model railways. There we go. And a lady that the production company introduced us to, who turned out to be an absolute godsend, and her name is Karina Stevens, or it was then. And she is actually a railway artist, and she is somebody who is now part of the Guild of Railway Artists. So that tells you how good she is. So there were 5 of us. In the end, the 6th person had to drop out due to illness. And we took part in the Great Model Railway Challenge. And it was a huge amount of fun, because we set out to have fun. Probably weren't desperately serious. I mean, let's be honest. We were in the heat with the Railmen of Kent. Of course, what did they do? They went on and won. So somebody inevitably was going to not win. And it was pretty certain it won't be us. We did, in fact, withdrew. There was, unfortunately, a medical incident for one of our teams, so we withdrew. But Steve Flint, bless him, who I do know reasonably well, came up to us and said, "I'd like to take you to Worley." So I don't know how many of you here who are here who I met at Worley, because I can honestly say we met thousands of people, because something about our layout, the fact we were doing it for and with kids and so on, seems to have attracted people's eyes. We had 8, 10 people queuing quite often, and it was very, very busy, and it was lovely, and we had a lot of fun. So before we do anything else, and before I talk about anything else, let's go to the first video.
This is the Loco Ladies. We were the first female, and in fact only female, team to take part in the Great Model Railway Challenge. Here we are being filmed, doing our presentation at the end to the judges. And this is some close work camera shots that were done during the time of the filming. Some of you will recognise this gentleman. Of course, it's Steve Flint. And the reason why we were invited to Worley in the November after our show had aired is because he invited us. I made a forest of crochet trees, not much liked by Kathy Millett, one of the judges, but nevertheless something that captured people's imagination. And at the end of Whalley, and with their permission, we sold them off, and the money went to breast cancer awareness charities.
We were none of us desperately experienced, but we managed in the 24 hours you're given to build a layout, as you can see. And it was a layout that we enjoyed making and was viewed by quite a lot of people. The crochet trees do seem to have lived past their actual real life, because people still talk to me about them sometimes. I sat down night after night and crocheted 2 each night, thinking, whenever am I going to finish? Because when I talked to the production company about it, they said, do a forest, it'll look amazing, it'll be different. Of course, if you did see our heat, Kathy Millett went, I don't know what those trees were all about, or something to that effect. I don't walk out my front door and see crochet trees. Now, to be fair, I had actually said to her, well, I don't walk out and see plastic ones like you see on most model railways, but equally, to be fair, Kathy and I got on extremely well, and we still do, and we're in contact. So she just came up to me and she said, they made me say nasty things like they always do. And she said that about the crochet trees, and of course that's what they showed. I suppose it attracted people's eye. Anyway, Whalley were very kind, and they said we could sell them off, and we did make quite a lot. Now, Karina had made cards, exquisite cards. She took cost, and then anything on top of that she put towards it. I think we took away about £450 for breast cancer awareness. So we were really happy about that, because it just seemed fitting one way or the other for various reasons, which I won't go into. So, end of Whalley, I came home, having, of course, looked at layouts there. Not that I escaped from ours very often, but anyway. And I thought, you know, I really need to do more to this. And I could see what I could do with changing, and I could see what would look really, what would look better. I also could tell that I'd made a few mistakes. Now, I'm sure everybody makes mistakes with the first layout, and I would class that as my first one. That was Edge, Hey and Strines version 1 and version 2. So trestle table, L shape. And as I say, Steve Flint then commissioned me to write an article, and we brought my grandkids in on it. That was the only time I had a professional photographer come to my house to take pictures of my layout. Every single other one I've had to take myself because of COVID, of course. And I'm fairly proud, if I'm absolutely honest, because I only have an iPad and an iPhone, and that is all I've ever used. Apart from, and you will see it later on, I do run a camera train now, and that is what camera do I use? Sorry, a GoPro. Sorry, I couldn't think of what it was called for a second. You know, a very rare little cube that I managed to buy secondhand, which sits on the back behind the locos on a carriage, and you will see some of that later. So kids and I got our heads down, started drawing out plans, started to think about what we were going to do. And David, again, bless him, set to and helped me build the staging. And we filled the room with a big square. Well, it is pretty well a square, perhaps not exactly. There, where you can see the pillars, is a lift-up section. That was an interesting challenge because there's quite a lot of track goes across that. You can get into the middle, and, well, there is a lot of track, basically. Far side, just in front of where that retaining wall is a pop-up hole, which lifts off, and that has a village on it. which is something else I'll talk about because that was one of my videos. That lifts out and you can get in there, and it means that what with little cutouts and bits that you can climb in underneath, you can reach all of it, because that's another bit that you learn. If it's more than 2'6" away from you, you've no chance of actually reaching things and doing it properly. So this time I designed it so we could all get to all of it. And we did start thinking about what we were going to do. And this is the map comes up again later. I will pass it around if you're interested. This is the map that we drew. Now, this isn't what I actually drew. I drew pen, a bit of pen and colour. I have a brother called David H. Smith. So some of you may know, he's actually a fine scale modeller, and he does write quite a lot of books about model railways and railway engines. And he drew this up, so it's much better than anything I could have ever done. But we thought what we were going to do, and then guess what happened? What happened to all of us? COVID. So I got the bug by then. So having got the bug, I started to build. And I started laying track for a start, of course. That's where I went back and took out every dodgy point that I put in the first time around that was secondhand, put new ones in, replaced bits of track, completely redesigned it, and went on from there. But because I couldn't see my grandchildren, and I've got a reasonable affiliation, I think, with most of them, if not all of them, I started to make videos so that they could keep up to date with what I was doing. Now, they were incredibly crude to start with because I hadn't a clue how to do it. I just used to take a bit of a shot of myself and a shot of what I was doing and send it to them. And their eldest son, or their son, Finn, said, "Grandma, why don't you edit them?" Well, I didn't even know he could, really. I mean, it wasn't my cup of tea. But I started to work on them. They started to get better. Ultimately, I did 52 of them. Now, admittedly, I would start it with a little bit of chat with them. They are not available for people to see because they were all aimed at the kids. And I'd send them out every Sunday morning. They actually became more than just that. And it is his fault. And I'll explain that in a minute. But if we could just go to the second video, this is a much longer video. It's 7 and a bit minutes long. But what it does do is allows you to actually see the layout, because I'm talking and I don't want to keep talking all the way through. This will explain to you what the layout looks like, and that's where you'll first see the camera train, which I have to say has proved to be great fun and quite popular. So I hope you enjoy this.
This video is a tour of Hey Strines Railway, which is my layout, and it's in a room in my house. And it is largely done with a camera train because I really enjoy doing that, and you can see so much more from it. This was the first layout, 2017. It grew in 2018, and by 2021, this is what it looked like. I'm going to start by showing you a map of Hey Strines Railway. My brother, David H. Smith, drew it up for me. He's also a well-known modeller, but he's much more of a fine-scale modeller than I am. What he's managed to capture, though, is the fact that there is an upper track that runs all the way around the outside of the layout and a number of lower-level tracks as well. This layout is large for a private layout. So this first photograph is from the doorway. It's at an angle because it was difficult to get a photograph of the whole thing. I'm going to tour it very quickly from the doorway in an anti-clockwise direction. We start at the front where there is a viaduct, go along a retaining wall and some arches that have shops in towards the church and the castle. Then we pan across past the village to the other side where there is a mountain and a castle. Then we go down past what is actually a harbour area and another village, and then go along the front on the rest of the viaduct, which runs along the front of the whole layout. This is an anti-clockwise tour which is taken from the other corner. Slightly easier to photograph, and it's from a different angle. So first we see a village, then we go along, over the viaducts and the bridges, round the corner where there's a station up on a higher embankment, past a manufacturing area, again towards the church and the castle, along past another village, and past the mountains where there are lots of crashing waterfalls. There's a harbour there in the front, there's Strines hamlet in the background, and in the front again there is the village. This is where I show you the layout in a bit more detail. We're on the higher track and I've turned the camera train inwards. So we start off at the station, go past Strines village, and we're going across a lift-up bridge with like a country park on it, past some hills, some mountains. We turn the corner, and what we're doing is heading across a retaining wall, over some arches and past the manufacturing yard. We go through a girder bridge, round the back of the church and the castle, and then we look down on Edge Hay village. And as we go past that, we can see the rest of the track in the distance. We're going to go through a tunnel here. And as we come out, we're looking out towards the harbour and back towards the village. Next, we're going on a forward-facing train, still on the higher track. This gives you another and a different view of the same thing. We're going across the bridges and the viaduct at the moment, across the lift-up bridge, going round the corner, past a station, up above the manufacturing yard, and heading towards the church and the castle, over the girder bridge. As we go round the corner, down on the left is Edge Hay village, and we're heading towards the mountains. And again, we're going to go through the tunnel, which shows how I've given access to any derailments or any other problems that might happen, because it's actually quite a long tunnel, this one. As we come out, you can just glimpse the harbour on the left there, and now moving on to the lower track. And again, we're going anti-clockwise. So we're going through a tunnel underneath the viaduct and the bridges. There's the viaduct on the right-hand side, under a road bridge, past the retaining walls on the right-hand side. There's a station on the left, there's the manufacturing yard, and on the right-hand side, there's some railway arches with shops in. We're now going past the girder bridge, out onto the main track. This track then continues round the layout towards the mountains, going through a tunnel and coming out on the other side where there is actually a lake and a river and a campsite. We're going through Strines hamlet and continuing through and then coming to a stop. This shorter clip, we're on the lower track facing inwards. We've come out through the tunnel, there's the river, there's Strines hamlet, and we're going to turn back onto the lift-up section, past a lake and past a whitewater river. This is a very short section where I've turned the camera train outwards and we're going past a small station and having a quick look at Strines Harbour. I'm now running a train round the inner track, which is towards the back of the layout. This is the other tunnel next to the one I showed you before. And as we come out, we go past the retaining wall and the village on the right-hand side. We go through another tunnel underneath the castle and the church, and as we come out of that tunnel, we're heading towards the main line again. This is the final bit of the camera train, and it's on the very inner track, past a station facing inwards towards Edge Hay village. Edgeshave Village is a pop-up hole, so it's possible for me to pick it up, lift it out in order to be able to get to the track and any other things that might need doing. As we come out, we're going to be going past the station and turning away from the inner track onto the main track again and coming to a stop by the mountains.
It's got a lot of detail on it. It's slightly scruffy around the edges, which you can't have missed, really, because I kept seeing it and thinking, In fact, subsequently, some of it's been reorganised and tidied up a bit. The important thing for me, though, was that the children wanted to play on it. And there's absolutely no shadow of doubt that they've done that. And the final video I will show you is the kids actually using it. But one of the things I did have a lot of fun with, and it wasn't too obvious on this one, but the next video I'm going to show you does show you that, I incorporated my family in the layout as well. So, for instance, if you saw railway arches, Holt's Wine Merchants actually is my another daughter. I have 3 and a son. She and her husband are wine merchants. And in fact, that has appeared in both photographs and videos that I've produced. And people recognise it because basically it's in Huddersfield, because I come from Yorkshire and so do they. And it's by the Tesco's there. And people drive out, see it and go, Carol, is that the one that I've seen on your model railway layout? That's just one of many. So we're running up, I think, to what you were talking about as being the break. And before I show you my final video in this section, one of the things I would say is this is probably an anathema to a lot of you, maybe not all of you. I know people like to model real places. They like to model them to a certain time, to an era. They like them to be authentic. I just didn't start out to do it like that, and I've not continued to do it like that. So people occasionally, Australians quite often, when they've seen one of my videos, say, what era is this, Carol? And I go, whatever you'd like it to be. Okay, now I know, I appreciate that some of you will be thinking, good grief, how could she? Well, I can, and I can for one reason and one reason only. It's basically a countryside. It's a world, and it's a small world, and it's one largely created by me, but with lots of input from the kids. We can put different trains on it. They can choose different locomotives. They can choose different carriages. They can and do sometimes put the right era in with the right ones. Sometimes they don't. Another grandson, James, is actually particularly keen on vehicles. He's not he's not terribly bothered about the trains. To be fair, he and I are building his own layout in his bedroom at home, and he has got trains on it, but he is really interested in the vehicles. So if he chooses to use modern vehicles or older vehicles, I have a drawer full, most of which are secondhand, not all of them. But he picks out the ones he wants, they pick out the trains they want, and they use them how they want to use them. Now, James is moving on. He's making his own layout. That's how kids get hooked. That's how they get interested. That's how they move on and enjoy what is actually a really absorbing hobby. There's absolutely no point in pretending. Well, it is to some people anyway. So I've had a lot of fun with it. I've used my imagination. I'm fortunate. I am an artist, or by background, I've got a certain amount of artistic ability. Probably not the temperament, although they maybe say differently. I like making things. I don't mind getting my hands dirty. The whole of my landing is a workshop. I have to put a screen across in front of it in case anybody comes to the house, because quite frankly, they'd be mortally horrified and I'd be a bit embarrassed by what I'm doing there quite often. But I'm quite happy to make and do all of these things. And if the kids enjoy it, good. As it happens, 1 or 2 people have clearly decided they like it as well, and they've moved on with it. Mentioned before we show this next video, Lawrence. Lawrence interviewed me for one of the World of Railways virtual exhibitions. And I'm probably mention it again, but I would say, by the way, that the latest one that is going to be in December, this layout is featuring as one of the layouts on it. I mentioned to Lawrence when we were talking privately before we did the interview and said, oh, I've been making these videos for the kids. Why don't you make them for other people, he said. And I listened to him and I thought, oh, okay. And I got commissioned to do a few before I'd actually even ever done one properly. World of Railways commissioned me to do some. Worley commissioned me to do some for their virtual exhibition. I did something it never occurred to me I'd ever do, which is set up a YouTube channel. So I have my videos on there and I don't push it particularly. I'm slightly nervous even now of things like Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, because I do know sometimes that people can be trolled quite unpleasantly on it. So I've been a bit apprehensive about it, I suppose. So I don't particularly talk about it that much, but I have got a couple of videos in particular that are being watched quite considerably, which makes me laugh really, because I think, why? But I did develop a technique of talking a bit, showing a bit, explaining a bit, showing a bit more detail, talking a bit at the end. And it's a formula now, if you like, that I've followed. These aren't those, by the way. I'm not sitting in front of these and talking because I'm standing here now, aren't I? So before we go to the break, this is a third video, and it is how my family has fitted in on this layout. So I hope you'll enjoy this one. Again, I think it's about 5 minutes long, and then by the time it's finished, I think we'll be ready to have a cup of coffee. I will anyway, or tea or whatever. So I hope you enjoy it.
I originally made this waterfall diorama to take out to exhibitions, but when they got cancelled, I decided to use it as the centrepiece of my layout. So it's now right in the middle of a series of mountains. It has tunnels and track going through it, and at the base it has a lake, and there is a campsite and various other things like swimmers, people playing and so on. And it's designed to be a bit of fun. Articles about the waterfall diorama and also the mountain range have appeared in Railway Modeller. This is what the new extension to the layout looked like when I started out. And across the front there's a lift-up bridge. And I made what I actually considered to be quite a bit of fun on this, which was like a countryside park, really. And there's a lake and an island in the middle, and lots of people doing things round it that were actually members of my family. So they know that this is them having a day out all together. This is the lift-up bridge, lifted up. Lower Strines Hamlet is a favourite place of mine, and it's appeared in British Railway Modelling as an article. There's lots of little houses on it, a church, a thatched cottage, trains run past it. It was a relatively small area to start with, and I just built it up from there, adding layers and layers of interest. There is a house on it, which in fairness I'd probably like to live in, and so would my grandson. During lockdown, my husband and I built a summer house in the garden so that we could have visitors during that period of time when we could only see people outside. So of course, we had to add it to the layout. My daughter and her husband are wine merchants, and they have a wine merchant shop in some railway arches. So this is their shop. And this is a short shot of how it all started when I started to make it. And this is a line along the line of the arches. I've started experimenting with a camera train. I use a little GoPro that I bought second-hand, and I'm just running it along past the railway arches and past a factory area. The manufacturing area has buildings in it named after our family. I have a cycling mad grandson. In fact, he's a champion cycling mad grandson. So what I decided to do was put him, well, actually in several places, actually on the layout. My son is a climber, so he is also on the cliffs. The harbour is one of my favourite areas, and it is an area that I really enjoyed making. I used my paints and my paintbrushes to create the look of depth, and I created the surface by layering it up with structure gel and heavy structure gel to create movement, and I used the heavy structure gel around the edges to create little waves which I painted. The walls are textured wallpaper, which I also painted, and I did use some resin ones that I bought to create the slipway. It was quite a complex process to make all of this, and there is going to be an article in next month's British Railway Modelling about how I made it. This is what the harbour looked like right at the very beginning. This is the harbour from the other side of the bridge. And I painted the back scene with walls because one of my grandsons said, "You can't have a harbour without walls, Grandma." I mentioned before that I like creating water on the layout, and there is a river that runs from the foot of the mountains and the lake there that runs round and into the harbour. So I just thought I'd add a few little shots of that as well. I have two villages on the layout. This one is Strines Village. Not quite finished, if I'm honest, but it does have a market in it and it does have cobbled streets. And this one is Edgehay Village, which is finished. And this one leads across the layout up towards the castle and the church.
When the train is running, there's a little chuffy chuffy noise, and that's actually come from his sound pad. Anybody who's done YouTube videos will know that you can't use music, you can't use sound without stepping on all sorts of toes about ownership of it. So I like to have a small amount of sound in the background, and I feel quite comfortable, you know, with a bit of bird song and a bit of sort of chuffy noises, you know, in the background. So I always put his logo on the end just to establish that I did this with him. So basically, I had a bit of fun doing these things. And we continue to have fun doing it because recently one of the kids said, "There should be a waterfall somewhere, Grandma, with a watermill." Why don't you make one that works? Oh. Okay, well, I'll look into that one then. On the top at the back there, you can just see the Daypole windmill. Well, I thought that looked really nice, but one of the kids has said, "Why don't you put a motor in it?" Well, I haven't a clue how to do that, but I do know that Fala do one that has a motor in it. So I might have a crack at doing things like that. To me, it's an incentive. It's the thing that keeps me interested, and it keeps me expanding and extending my ability to do things. That back scene thing, whew, Grandma, you can't have a harbour without a back scene. That was Jodie, by the way. Well, I made sure we had one then because I painted it. So we've had a lot of fun with it. I will talk a little bit more about how I've come across and made decisions about how I'm going to model things afterwards. In other words, the scenic side of it. And I've a couple more videos to show you, including children playing on the layout, running trains, which I think you'd probably quite enjoy, actually, because let's face it, everybody wants to do that. And by the way, there's an awful lot of tunnels and they cross over each other. And that's very deliberate because kids like tunnels, don't they? If you put a train in one place, they think it's even better if it comes out somewhere they're not expecting it to. So I actually made a point of doing some of that. Anyway, I think if Alex is ready, time for the interval now. greenery. Probably, in fairness, the thing I like doing best. I know that that mountain in the corner is not a real mountain to most people, although there is an element.
It looks misbehaving.
Yes, it does, just at the wrong time. Yeah. It is in fact based on Malham Tarn and Malham Cove. Although I can always hold my hands up and say, well, I know there's no tunnels, I know there's no trains, I know there's no villages. There isn't even a campsite at the base of it. Nevertheless, there was a sort of element there for me of that's how I came to think of it. But I really did start out, as I showed you in that last video, with the little waterfall diorama in the corner. Now, I made that after Whalley, when I got asked if the loco ladies would go out and do demonstrations at model railway exhibitions. So Whalley was in the November. The first one that we ended up going to was the one in Doncaster. And Chrissy, one of the local ladies, and I took some things there, and I, in the meantime, made the waterfall diorama. Guess what? We never went to any more after that, did we? So rather than waste it, or rather than hang on to something that I knew I would possibly supersede with other things, I used it on the layout. So somebody in the interval asked me about, do I scratch build everything? Of course I don't. I wouldn't have had time to build something this big if I'd scratch built it all. I'm no fine scale modeler, but I do like detail, and I do have a lot of fun working with existing things as well as starting them from scratch myself. So I am certainly not averse to buying off eBay. I'm not even sure I should have mentioned that, come to think of it, off an online auction house. You don't think eBay are watching? No, I don't think so either. Kids and I would scour it looking for things that we thought looked suitable. And because I'd always put this little comment somewhere about, oh, well, I'm buying this for my grandchildren, people always used to throw extra bits in. We'd go to the secondhand stalls at the exhibitions. And there's a remarkable amount of valuable things that you can get very cheaply, especially if you pick through things. Although to be fair, after COVID, Chrissy and I said the other day that we didn't think we would be picking through things in quite the same way like we used to, you know. I'm quite happy to use secondhand. Usually somebody somewhere has put a lot of love and attention into making it. Now, we all know that layouts get taken down. Sometimes people move on to different gauges. Sometimes, sadly, they've passed away. To me, it's doing an honour to the effort that they've put into it if I use them. They never stay the same, though. I work with them. So, for instance, you saw a little bit about the manufacturing area. Now, they're Metcalfe manufacturing buildings. They don't particularly look like them now. I'm sure you recognise them, largely because they're all covered in coal dust and look grubby and dirty and as if they've been well used in a semi-real world. Looking round at this, somebody before was asking me about castles. I do talk about it in the next video, I think, but when I started, and it's not that long ago, as you know, it's only less than 4 years ago, it wasn't that easy to get ruined castles, but the kids really wanted ruined castles. These are actually aquarium castles. I don't know if you know Andy Hudson from Whalley. I know him quite well. He once said to me, how did you know they were to scale? Well, I sort of went like this, Andy, and thought that looks about right, you know. But I didn't keep them as they were, because they're always incredibly cutesy and really horrible, actually, for a model railway. So paint them, stick things on, add people, add greenery, have some fun with them. And one in the far corner is actually one of the dioramas that may or may not one day make their way to model railway exhibitions, because it lifts off. The church next to it is also a diorama. Now that's, you'd probably recognise again, that's a Metcalfe. I do use lots of the super quicks on there. I mean, you know, these are all, I'm sure, at times, people that you've used their items from. I like the Scaledale houses. That one I said I'd like to live in was one of the Scaledale ones, one of the Hornby ones. They have a major disadvantage, though, to me, because the next thing I will be showing you is that I do like this layout as well. That was another challenge. I'd never done anything like that before either. But you put a light inside the Scaledale and the whole of the walls glow excitingly. So I discovered you have to paint the insides black before you light them, and then you have to do things to the windows and so on. I've got some of the Daypole kits. There's a church over there. Now, I actually made that for the Great Model Railway Challenge, and I actually created a space for it. But you will see in that I thought it looked absolutely beautiful. I'd lit the inside of it. I'd got street lights around it, and there's a little red glow somewhere where it came through the walls. You really have to look closely at these things sometimes. So I'm not averse to using secondhand. I know the harbour, and there is a word that sometimes people use about my layout, busy, busy. Well, it's quite busy, isn't it? Now, I do know that some people are being quite derogatory when they say that. Others are going, there's lots to see on it. It's very busy, isn't it? And some of them go, oh, it's awfully realistic. The world's like this, isn't it? It's busy. So, you know, busy can be used in all sorts of ways. But I've got that harbour, the one that is in British Railway modelling now. There's a lot of aspects of that I took a lot of time and effort to make. It's only a small area and it's busy. But on there is a lighthouse. Now, I know the lighthouse is in the wrong place. You'll be able to tell when you look at it in a bit more detail. But that was my dad's. David drilled a hole up the middle of it for me, and I stuck a light on it because I wanted it to light up across the harbour. And the only place I could find to put it was in the wrong place. So I just put it there anyway. Because it's my layout. You know, it's my layout. I've had a lot of fun doing it. People seem to like it. I'll have to take it down one day. I mean, I'll be brutally honest. David has Parkinson's and I've got dodgy knees. We've got 3 flights of stairs and the house is over 4 floors. We might have to leave it one day, in which case we'll have to take it down and get rid of it. But we aren't there yet. So at the moment, we just keep going. But as I say, it's my layout. I've had fun with it. It's the kids' layout. We've got different levels of track on there too, which you may or may not have picked up on. The lower level track winds itself all over the place. And I designed the track very deliberately for lots of trains to be able to run on it. But I'm not particularly good on some of the technology that's involved with track laying. So I will hold my hand up here. And again, this is going to probably not be what most people would expect. None of it's wired. Don't wire any of my track together. The whole thing runs off the controller. Now that's most of it, or a lot of it, 4 years, and I've never had any issues with it at all. And the children can run up to 4 trains, 5 trains sometimes on it, and they all work perfectly well. I don't wire my points. I did replace them all with newer ones, but all of the points can either be reached from just over there by that controller or just here. I designed the whole thing so that people can reach it and physically change the points. And yes, I could take the challenge on of wiring it all up, or alternatively, I could take it all off again and start again and do something different. I might well do that one day. But the second level of track is just an oval. It's the higher level, it's got the viaducts, it's got that bit of viaduct, it's got where the arches are, all the rest of it, that retaining, with a notorious retaining wall that people keep looking at on my YouTube channel, and which I'm very happy about, by the way. It is for David's trains. He's not really that interested, but he has 1 or 2, shall we say, bigger locomotives. Merchant Navy class. Can't even remember the rest of them, but they're longer and they have tenders on, and we put bigger coaches on them. And you put them on the lower level track, which a lot of which is radius 1, and they come straight off them. So I actually subsequently added the higher level track. It wasn't there to start with. That was an interesting challenge as well. How do you add a whole level of track that in real life is 6 to 8 inches above the rest of it and make it look as if it should have been there in the first place? Well, overall, I think I probably succeeded reasonably well. So I paint things, I stick things together. I use unusual items as well. How many people use toilet paper on their layout to create things? Not many, maybe. I do get through gallons of something called Mod Podge, I must admit, but all of those cliff faces started off with insulating foam, and I create the surfaces on them, layer of Mod Podge, push toilet paper till I get what I can see will look right. Mod Podge on top. Once it's dried hard, I paint it. They are interesting. They work. Water. Said I like to make water, didn't I? I always know that I could be saying something slightly silly when I say that. I like to make water on my layout. I use something called structure gel and heavy structure gel. Now, as an artist, if any of you are artists, you'll know that that is how you create some surfaces on a painting. So if you're painting something like a sunflower and you want it to have some life to it, you would use the structure gel and the heavy structure gel to create that depth to it. Once you've done that, you can paint it, or you can paint underneath it. So all of my water is created by layer of toilet paper, a lot of paint till I'm happy the depth looks right and some of the currents are there, and then I dollop this structure gel on it. The water in the river and the dock look as if it's moving when you go to it and have a look at it. It's extraordinary stuff, and it seems to work. So I've played around over a period of time and found things that work for me that aren't ridiculously expensive. By the way, I hate using plaster of Paris. Just something about it I don't like. And it's awfully messy, and it's awfully messy to clear up afterwards. Frankly, I'd use toilet paper any day over that, but that's just a personal choice. But having created a lot of this, one of the things I wanted to do was light it for effect. Nobody's effect but me and the kids, by the way. So this video, the next video, is about how I added lighting. Now, again, I'm not particularly knowledgeable about wiring, so I did use, because somebody gave me some anyway, the Woodland Scenics Just Plug system. Do you know it? It's very, well, for me, it was very easy to use. I could do a lot of effects with it without having to, okay, I have arthritis in my hands. Probably a few people here sitting there thinking, oh, I've got that as well. I drop things, and I don't find it easy to do certain things. I don't find it particularly easy to solder. Therefore, the Just Plug system suits me, because you literally just plug things in. So a lot of what you see has been done that way. So I will let you watch this video.
I started doing my lighting in the manufacturing area, and I lit the buildings, I lit underneath the canopies, and I put street lights in. The street lights are in the manufacturing area. They're also along where the arches and the retaining wall are. So I'm going to do a little video clip here along the manufacturing area, peeping over the top to Holt's Wine Merchants, which actually belongs to my daughter and son-in-law. It's a real place. And then across to the church and to a ruined castle and a village. This is the factory at night. So similar shots to the ones I've shown you before, along the length of the manufacturing area and the arches, and across to the street light that's outside Holtzwine Merchants, and also the canopy and one of the buildings. This is a more detailed and longer series of shots along the length of the layout, the manufacturing area, because actually I was really rather pleased with this. The lighting system is the Woodland Scenics Just Plug system, which I've found quite useful, actually, quite easy to use. And I was very fortunate to be given quite a lot of it to start with. So I only really needed to top up what I needed. Over there you can see the church, you can also see the castle, which is lit at night, and the beginning of some of the lighting around the village. You caught a glimpse of Edghay village before, so I'm going to show you a bit more detail. This is a village that I have a video of how I made it on my YouTube channel. It's a Yorkshire stone village. I lit this village using LED lights, and these were small LED lights with a handheld controller, and I put the LED lights into the houses and some into the streets, and I could switch them all on using this controller. It worked very well till the batteries started running out, and they became a bit of a pain because you had to unscrew each one of them and add additional batteries into them. But it was an experiment, and for a period of time it looked very good. Above the village there is a castle and a church. I made the castle from an aquarium castle, which I painted up, and the church is a Metcalfe one. I have a video of this on my YouTube channel. I've been very pleased with this because I took the aquarium castle, painted it, adapted it, and added figures. The ruined castle can be lifted off and become a diorama, so I lit it to make it look quite dramatic, and I used the Just Plug system to do that, and of course I painted it to look as dramatic as that as well. The church next to it is also a diorama that can be lifted off. It's a Metcalfe church with a wedding going on in it, and I lit that also with the Just Plug system so that the stained glass windows shine out across the layout. I enjoyed making Strines Hamlet. It's a favourite place of mine, and an article has appeared in British Railway Modelling about it. The mountains behind it have also been in Railway Modeller. I wanted to light this as well, so it has the Just Plug street lights, and each of the buildings have lights in them. I had to repaint the church though when I realised the light shone through the walls of it. The harbour has a lighthouse, which I did want to be flashing, so I drilled a hole up the middle of it and put one of the Just Plug lights in it. And I was actually quite pleased with the effect because it had belonged to my father and I had wanted to incorporate it. These are a few more views of the harbour, across to the slipway and to the boat house, some of the boats on the water, and also one of the fishing vessels. And again, I lit this at night and managed to get some really quite nice shots across the water, shining out. And there were also one or two other shots, again of the boathouse, but at night. And this is my favourite, again at night, but up onto the boathouse and the slipway.
Yes, so to me, lighting added a bit of fun to it. Again, I mean, I don't know how many people here. I'm sure a lot of the layouts that are based here, and I'm sure some of you have added lighting to it. It can look effective. It can also stop unexpectedly, which is what happened to me with those the little LED ones. I bought them, they'll have been Chinese or Taiwan, I suppose, and they looked absolutely amazing. And you could get various effects with them. But as I say, they took the little button batteries, and by the time you'd finished, it cost an absolute fortune. So I will possibly or probably relight that village again at some point. But as I said, I always had in mind the kids when I did this. So trains had to run on it. Unfortunately, and it may be, fortunately. I do clean the track regularly. The trains run extremely well. In fact, to the extent that I can take off the controllers that you've seen there. They're Morley controllers. They're quite robust. And when you've got kids playing on them, it's quite useful when they're fairly robust. And also, they have another big advantage. And when you see the trains running, you'll see Jodie with this. They have a handheld thing on a long string, I suppose. And it does mean that you can, whilst they're not freestanding, you can walk around and go on and do other things like change points and move around it. So I quite like that, but I can take them off. And I've got a digital controller, and I just plug the digital controller in, and the digital trains run on it. I've actually was quite pleased with myself when I put a couple of chips and some, DCC ready locos. I know this is probably stuff that all of you do, but it was new to me. And I like the digital trains because I can have them running in all sorts of different directions. But I don't let the children use them because I paid money for them. I mean, a lot of the locos I've got were either given to us or I bought secondhand or we got from the model railway exhibitions. Yeah, I've cleaned them up, taken them to pieces, put them back together again sometimes. There's at least two that I didn't manage to get back because I think I lost bits. But they're allowed to play with certain things. But I do actually have a few things that are special to me. And David has one or two things that are special to him, and they're not allowed to play on those or with those. And they get locked away when they come, on pain of death if they touch them, frankly. No doubt as they get a bit older, they might be allowed to play with them. They are getting older, by the way. I don't know if this happened to you, but during lockdown, the little 13-year-olds, no, they would have been 11-year-olds, I suppose, 12-year-olds. I mean, one of them is now 6'1". And I blinked and I even saw something of him, but that happened. He's the one actually I'm building the layout with, to be fair. They all change. One's actually left school and gone to college. And that's in a blink of an eye, really. So they want to do different things. So try and move this on. I'm going to show you some trains running on the layout. And I'll talk very, very briefly about where I go next. And I think there might be some questions. But yeah, so this is the last of the videos. And this is running some trains. Now, the one who isn't on here is James, who's the one who's doing his own layout. I can't actually remember why he didn't get videoed. But the rest of them, or some of the rest of them are there. There's an older couple of girls who aren't really that fussed anymore. But they are quite a bit older. So, right.
Grandma, at this speed it goes, it makes it up there.
Right.
It slowly pulls its way up. That's specific. And then
ticket checks on the operation of this station.
wait, what?
And in fact, you couldn't quite hear him in the background, but Jodie, who has a very, very strong Yorkshire accent, bless him, was going, if I keep it at that speed, Grandma, it gets right up the incline and it'll go all the way up to the top. Well, they're quite heavy, those Pullman carriages. So he was right. You did have to keep the speed up a bit to get it working. And as for Josh, she didn't know I was taking pictures of that with the Smoky Joe. You know, you have to go fast occasionally, don't you? Just to show you that even as they're getting older, they do use it, they do like it, they do have fun with it. And that young man who you saw more of probably, because I had him for the day, you know, as you do, and he spent quite a bit of time up there with me. You might notice that he'd got these, the speed was pretty good. Wasn't going too fast, wasn't going too slow, looked all right. He's the one that used to crash them 18 months ago. Having going all sorts of speeds and bashing into each other. So where am I going with anything next? Well, I have obviously stuff to finish on there. One of the things I've always had a bit of a hankering for, although they're very difficult to get now, is the Magna Rail. I don't know if any of you actually use Magna Rail. I managed to get some just before Brexit, so it was actually sent from Europe through to me. I mean, they don't pay a lot, I would say, actually, in these magazines, but you do get a little bit when you write an article and you take photographs yourself and you do videos. So I bought the Magna Rail, and these are the cyclists, you know, the little cyclists with the legs that go round. I know people have seen them, certainly at Worley and other places. Well, I had a hankering to do that. So the lift up village is going to come out, and there will be another village that can be slotted in there with little cyclists going round. And I'm actually going to have people walking dogs and a few other things that I've got that I think I will do with that. And that will actually be able to, again, go to model railway exhibitions as dioramas. Although as I'm standing here at the moment waiting for 2 new knees, not actually sure whether I'm going to be able to do that, but we'll see. But I certainly would be doing videos and things. In fact, the article's been commissioned about me doing it anyway. So I have other things that I've got in mind. The kids, as I said, have come up with some other suggestions. I will do some more YouTube videos. They seem to be of moderate interest to people, and I quite like doing them. And I will certainly turn up at model railway exhibitions when I've got enough energy and I can find enough paracetamol to keep going. because I like coming out and I like to meet people, and I've done that in the past, and I certainly hope to do it again soon. I do know that I know Doncaster's running, and I think Ali Pali, which, yeah. So things will start to happen again, and perhaps I'll meet some of you there.
Thank you, Carol. Now, I'll take the questions out of the chat first of all, and I think we'll open up with one gentleman who I think we both know, Mr. Jamie Ward.
Hello, Jamie.
Who I had the pleasure of interviewing. Nice and straightforward, Carol. Did you find making the videos about Hey Strines Railway for your grandkids gave you a boost for your mojo and encouraged you to keep going?
Absolutely and totally. Yeah. They were inundated with these things. Of course, every Sunday I'd send another one. And sometimes I knew who'd watched them, by the way. I don't know if they knew I knew. Sometimes they'd watch them. Sometimes they'd watch them later. Sometimes they'd take the hint and watch them, just before the next one came out. But yes, it did, because I was able to send them personal messages. I was able to keep in contact with them. And genuinely, I think it probably kept us closer because of that. And it was enjoyable. And overall, I think they watched most of them. And we had a lot of fun with that side of things as well. And of course, it led on to me doing other things as well.
Thank you. Another one of our members, Mr. James Pett, quite a lot of us strive for very, very naturalistic styles of model railways, but you seem to go a little more towards impressionism. Do you feel there's a small scope, but even more need for impressionistic and abstract layouts?
I would say if you're going to do a layout of imagination, and that's exactly what this is, and I've said that all the way through, then you're going to get some realism and you're going to get quite a lot of impressionism. Do I think it's a way forward? I'm sure that there are a lot of people who are thinking of doing model railways, maybe watching this, maybe not, but maybe reading articles, possibly attending model railway exhibitions and seeing people and other things that they've done, who might well be very happy to be looking to do it in a slightly different way. I certainly hope so. I've had a lot of fun with it, and I'm sure other people would as well.
Fantastic. Now, you've talked about cleaning the tracks, and obviously also you've talked about sourcing models from all sorts of places, including rummaging at exhibitions. What I will put a plug in very quickly for is, of course, the GMRC shop.
I've actually had, in fact, there were 3 carriages and one of the things in the background I bought from you.
Because the shop's been a great way to still provide that service when exhibitions work round.
Yeah.
But you talked about cleaning the tracks. How do you clean your buildings?
How do I clean my buildings? I have a
Well, the
vacuum
layout is always immaculate.
I can't remember who make it now. I think it might be Woodland Scenics. They do little handheld vacuum cleaners. They're very small. They're quite narrow. They've got quite a narrow end. That's really good for picking up bits and pieces. I actually I cover it, to be fair. That Velux you can see up there is an absolute nightmare in the summer because the sun shines through it for about 6 hours of the day. And of course, what would happen to the track? It would swell and it would get smaller, and I'd have all sorts of problems with it. And I have a balcony umbrella, one of these half ones that you'd have up against a wall. So I put that up over it, and that covers quite a proportion of it to stop the sunlight. And the rest of the time, I've just got old sheets and I cover it so it doesn't get too dusty.
Fantastic. Questions from the floor? Anybody would like to ask a question? Sir, front row.
Yeah, maybe Carol could say a little bit more about how she models the cliffs and also the painting and the colours you use in the cliffs, because they're really fascinating.
To be fair, there are a couple of videos that I've done on it, but I'm perfectly happy to say I do use loft insulation, although I also know that it's very difficult to get just at the moment. It's one of those building materials that aren't readily available, because I was looking for some to do something with James. I like using that because you can carve it. That's the first thing. If you're wanting to create something that looks right, you need to be able to carve it. And the loft insulation works really well just with an ordinary vegetable knife. It works fine. The second thing is you need something to stick it together that's robust, because once you've stuck it, what you don't want it to do, and PVA does this, is banana and come apart. I mentioned I use Mod Podge. That works really well. And I use pins that I stick it together and I leave it till it's properly dry. I then put this toilet paper on and I push it into place on a layer of Mod Podge, put the Mod Podge on top. That goes absolutely rock hard at the end of it. Then you've got something. Now that does help that I'm an artist. I tend to use a brush and flick on it. I might paint it because it's sort of Yorkshire based. I'll paint it grey in the first place. I will put buff titanium on it. I use a bit of white, and then I'll use a very, very dark grey and flick that onto the bits that stick out. And it is really quite quick and simple, but it looks extremely effective. Thank you. Yeah.
Any more questions from the floor?
Hello. Right.
Well, that's quite important for us, yes.
It is. Because I only use an iPad and an iPhone, and they're ones I've had for a while too. They're not even the newest. I went looking for free software that you can run using those. I suppose I can name it. I use iMovie. And I found once you've got to get to grips with it, takes a bit of doing. Once you've got the hang of it, you can produce extraordinary things with it. So I like iMovie. And then the other camera that I use is the GoPro. Now, again, when you're actually, this is not one I showed you it on, but when you're running when I'm running my camera train, which is the GoPro, I can watch it on my iPad, so I can see what it's doing and immediately save it to it and then transfer it into iMovie and then drop it into where I want it. So I've made my life as easy as possible, frankly, and it's worked perfectly well for me.
Can you link that up to a video?
I have no idea. If I'm absolutely honest, the young man we were talking about earlier on, Jamie Warren, and of course,
Mr. Alex Croft,
Alex knows about videos. And I'm pretty certain that, you know, you're going to talk to somebody who's a great deal more expert than I am. I might have come up with a formula and I might have come up with a way of doing things, but that just happens to be my way. And it might not be for everybody.
Tony? No question? Any more questions? Go on.
Where I come from this, my great-grandfather was with the Southern Railway, and he worked his way up from porter to station master at Ashford. And his eldest son went to work for Southern. He was my grandfather, and he was with them until his retirement. He had an interesting interlude that in the First World War, when the conveyance of war material to the front was done through Richmond in Kent, of which there are vestiges still in existence, but he was active at Ashford, whatever it was. So for me, there's the artistic and the practical, whatever it is, but there's also a family connection.
Mm.
Well, that's brilliant, and thank you for sharing that with us. And I'm happy to tell everybody, as well as yourself, to keep an eye out, because in the first quarter of next year, we will be inviting Graham Muspratt to talk to us about actually modelling the Southern.
Mm.
So look forward to that. Well, if there's no more questions, it's my great pleasure to hand the microphone back to our chairman, Tony Cox.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Carol. I have to say that was a fascinating lecture.
Thank you.
And also what came out so much, and this sometimes gets lost in this hobby, it's a hobby for fun.
Mm.
And I have to say, you really showed us, really, this is fun,
Oh,
isn't
thank
it?
you.
And I
Yeah.
think it really brought out how much that is. And so thank you very much for that. Now, one other little thing, I must admit, the membership secretary just came up to me, and I didn't realise this until 2 minutes ago. You have actually joined the club.
I'm a member of your
Yes,
and
but I gather you do not have a membership card.
no, I don't.
So I have great pleasure in presenting you with your membership card.
There we go.
So I have to admit, I didn't know that till about 5 minutes ago either. Okay, well, thank you very much, Carol. Thank you for coming
Pleasure.
down from Yorkshire, bringing your support group with you. And also, thank you to our technical team,
Yeah.
particularly those of us who are seeing us on the web. So Alex, Lawrence, Derek, and thank you very much. Thank you very much, Carol.
Pleasure.
And we look forward to see you again at our next lecture on the 11th of November, which on Permanent Way, which I'm afraid I can't remember. Gareth Dennis is the presenter. So 7:30 on the 11th of November. Okay, well, thank you again, Carol. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. And as I said, all being well, we will have the footage from tonight up on the GMRC YouTube channel in a few days' time. Thank you, and a safe journey home to you all.